Now let's look at one of the best frameworks that spirituality has and works super well with everything that we have just been talking about, and that is, of course, David Hawkins' scale of consciousness. So we can see the map of consciousness on the right, and we can see where our energetics are based off of the emotional states and where our level of awareness is at, our view of life, our God view, and what we're processing, as well as what is our paradigm in survival, reason and integrity, and spiritual. And we can use the picture on the left to see the associations clearly with the chakra system. So what I want to make super clear is that it's not like you are going to have everything in your experience go from shame to enlightenment. In fact, you'll be processing different aspects of your reality, bringing it from shame, for example, all the way into enlightenment, or like fear into enlightenment. And so maybe one week you are dealing with a certain fear that you have and you finally get over it and bring it into enlightenment, but then the next week you're processing some other anger and then you have to bring that into enlightenment. Which brings us to the next slide, which is a very important aspect, is the spiral nature of the path. So we can see on the right, this is another way of explaining the scale of consciousness by David Hawkins. And I think this one does a really good job because it shows the contracted states of the lower negative energies and emotions, and then the higher expansive states of the higher vibrations like joy, love, peace, and enlightenment, the ultimate consciousness. But along that, let's look at these other two images of the spiral, giving a bird's eye view and then like a side view of this is actually how the spiritual path acts. It's not linear at all. And so sometimes you'll feel really down in the contracted state to then switch over to the expanded state. And you'll slowly, the expanded state and the contracted state will get longer, more time under each of them. But if we look at this side view, we can also see there is also a point where you're stuck in the contracted states and then eventually you're more in the expanded states. Even though you still have contractions, you're now framed and are embodying more of this expanded state. This is a beautiful thing about the Creator and our experience. So grateful that He created this matrix to be that once you get to about 51% of embodying the positive expanded experience, that you will fully start to feel enlightenment, Christ consciousness, or whatever you want to call it. And while you will still be having to go through stuff, because enlightenment, Christ consciousness, is really the starting line, you get to start to fully feel ecstasy, bliss, and these really high states at once you cross the threshold of 51%. Isn't that beautiful? You know, you can get a failing grade on a test and you're still passing. All right, let's get into some more practical tools for embodiment. Because what we talked about was a lot of the emotional and mental side of it, which I think is very essential. But let's also talk about the physical side of it and the scientific sides of how we can practically become embodied. So I think one of the easiest ways of explaining it is through regulating the nervous system. The nervous system is a great way of understanding how everything is energy in our body and how we're perceiving everything. And so through the lens of the sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system, we get this obvious yin and yang nature, this fight or flight or freeze response versus a parasympathetic nervous system, which is way more responsive, restful, and meditative. And so really key aspects to embody is through meditation, through yoga, qigong, breathwork, and movement. Maybe you're not into yoga, qigong, meditation, breathwork, but any physical movement, this is why people feel so much better when they start exercising or playing sports, because this helps regulate your nervous system greatly. Now, I think the more intentional you are with your movement and practices like yoga, qigong, meditation, breathwork gets you deeper into self-awareness and self-realization, so that you can fully feel these emotions, to understand your body and your energy better, anything towards the path of healing yourself is obviously great. And now I have to add this because this is easily one of the most healing things, is spending time in nature. We're so disconnected from nature physically that we're so disconnected from our own inner nature. So really getting sunlight, grounding, forest bathing, getting clean air and structured water is super important for embodiment. Let's just take a break and talk about like all the mystics in the world. They were always in nature and talking about nature. I mean, this is from the yogis of India to the mystics like Jesus and the Essene group he's from, to every mystical tradition. Nature is primary because we are nature. And then another thing for regulating the nervous system, and actually it's foundational to all these things, is finding stillness. If you cannot find stillness in your experience, then you're still stuck in sympathetic nervous system. You're still stuck with a lot of negative emotions, and you're still getting distracted from the present moment. Another quick way of understanding all of this is through the brainwaves. I won't go super deep into detail about this. I have a video about this concept if you want to learn more, but I want to quickly say that most people are stuck in beta brainwaves as the predominant brainwave. And this brainwave is associated with the sympathetic nervous system and fight or flight. And while there is some positives to some of the lower brainwaves of beta when it comes to thinking and concentrating, we just don't want this to be the predominant. We want to be balanced. We want all of our brainwaves to be balanced. And so when we balance all of our four brainwaves of the beta wave, the alpha wave, theta, and delta, then do we get to the mystical brainwave of gamma waves, which is associated with insight, peak experience, synchronization, and also the superconscious. Now let's go into a really overlooked aspect about the emotional guidance system and how to be embodied, and that is to see how it's stored in the body. I mean, it's literally called embodiment, energy in the body. And so feel the emotions and memories in the body. The mind does not store memories and emotions. The body does. It's stored in the muscles, bones, tissue, organs, fascia, and nervous system. This still surprises me today that most people do not realize this. But this is foundational, especially for requalifying your emotions and also embodiment. This is why practices like yoga and qigong are so important, because it really gets you aware of all these aspects and this synchronization of your body, your emotion, your mind, and the energy systems. So in TCM, they have a great system that shows which emotions are associated with which organs. So we have the heart and small intestines associated with hate and impatience, the spleen and stomach and pancreas with worry and anxiety, the lungs and large intestines with sadness and depression, the kidney and bladder with fear and fright, and the liver and gallbladder with anger and frustration. We can also look at, the bone structure and the muscle structure and the tissue structure, with jaw tension being control and suppressed expression, the neck and shoulders being stress and responsibility, the chest being grief and heartbreak, the core being anxiety and control, the hips being the fear and trauma, guts storing worry and digestion of life, the lower back storing support and security, the knees with flexibility and direction, and the ankles with stability and support. What I really want to get across with this as well is that the muscle tightness is really the last aspect of the memory aspect. So when someone is very loose in the muscles, they have a very good flow of energy, of emotions going through them. And so muscles is really the last aspect for memory and stagnant energy to fall into place. Starting through the nervous system, into the fascia, and into the organs would be more of the primary aspects of where it is initially starting to be stored. So you can see once you regulate your nervous system or clean out your organs and work with the fascia, then your muscles, your bones, your tendons will start to relieve these memories, these energies, these emotions, and start to loosen up.